And good, bright, and beautiful morning, and welcome to Easy Bible Study. My name is Kimberly Mann, and today we are covering one of the most iconic passages in all of Scripture. It is something that many people have written about. One of my favorite books is called We Who Wrestle with God, and it is based on the premise of this particular passage as something that everybody goes through in life, that we all at some point in our life have to wrestle with God and who He is. So I'll be right back right after this, and let me know, have you wrestled with God recently, lately, or ever? I'll be right back right after this.
You can have all this world. Give me Jesus.
And welcome back. And you will find that my cameras have changed around a little bit, but some of the things are still the same and still in place. So if you do find any value in this content, do me a favor. Go ahead and click like, subscribe, turn on that notification. If I can do this like with my hands, so I can be Vanna White. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any of my content. And absolutely look forward to you sharing what you find valuable for yourself. So hopefully you do find value here today, and hopefully you do get that what we are here to do is to bring value to Christianity, to bring value to Christians. And the purpose of this channel is not to build up or even to bring people over to Christ, although that'd be great if that's a side benefit of it. But really the purpose of this channel is to build you in your daily walk with God by giving you something that you can be a part of every single day as we walk through passages of Scripture. So I apologize because, oh, there we go, take that off because some of my cameras, I had to move some of my cameras around, so I apologize if my hot buttons are not exactly what they should be right now. So let me just do a quick double test. All right, there's that one, and then there's that one. Okay, great. So now I do know at least which cameras I want to be with. All right. But I will say that today we are looking at this passage, and we are in Genesis chapter 32, and we are on verses 22 to 32. So let's go ahead and grab the passage and let's get into it today. All right, here we go. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent them over that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. And that is God's word for us today. So let's see if we can do this. I do apologize, folks. No, we're going to take that off too. Oh, it's going to be a mess. This is my first time with the new hotkeys. I may have to like change them around just so that I don't have to deal with this. So that my old brain doesn't have to rewire. See, I don't even know what it has to do. All right, let me double check one more thing here. Let's see. We got that one there. And then we have that one there. All right. So between the two, yep, we are good. All right. So let's talk about this right here, Jacob wrestling with God. So first of all, we need to take a look at a couple of things. Number one, the first thing that Jacob does, remember, if you remember back to what we were talking about last week, and I do apologize, I did not mention that I was taking a week off for vacation. So I did forget to mention that. So I apologize for not having videos other than shorts last week. But another bit of, like, shall we say, good news is we are over 400 subscribers at this point, which is awesome. Can't wait till we hit that 500. That 500 mark is like one of my big goals, my first goals. And that would be awesome if that was very soon here, because if we hit that before the end of July, it will have only taken us six months to have got to 500. But if it doesn't happen till August or September, that's fine too, whatever God's will is on this. But the first thing that Jacob does in this passage is he rises up that night and he takes his wives and his two women servants. Now, when it's referring to his wives, to his two wives and his two women servants, he is talking about the maid servants of his wives that he has had children with. So in a way, even though they aren't technically, they are like considered the children of his wives, they are the wives, they are the concubines as they would have seen them in that day. So they are not just any old woman servant, they are the mothers of his children. But because of their status and the way that happened in the ancient world, they were considered his women servants, or they were considered his property, basically, which I realize not that cool, or at least most people don't think of that as that cool. All right. But this is the way they did things in the ancient world. So we're not going to say whether it was right or wrong. It's not how we do things nowadays, but it does not seem that God is actually saying against this. So when you do hear people talk about having multiple wives and having this and that, there is actually nothing in the Old Testament that says that you can't have multiple wives. In fact, we do think in the New Testament, when it talks about in Timothy, where it says that a pastor must be the husband of one wife, we actually think that is God saying, yeah, you cannot take care of the bride of Christ and a one wife and then have another wife on the side as well. No, you cannot have multiple wives and be a pastor. It's too much work. God recognizes that having more than one wife is a lot of responsibility and it's a lot of work, and a pastor just can't handle it. And that's kind of where we get that tradition in our society, for having only one wife and for anything else to be considered taboo. So bigamy is not preached against in the New Testament or the Old Testament. So I just want that to be really clear. Personally, would I be okay with my husband having another wife? No. That's not going to happen in my marriage. But would my husband want another wife? No, he doesn't want a second wife either. He thinks having one wife is enough work for him as well. So, so that is, however, when you do as a Christian, when you see people who have two wives, you cannot actually turn to them and tell them that it's unbiblical, because there is no passage that says that you cannot have more than one wife. So keep that in mind. So Jacob here, he rose up that night, took his two wives and his two women servants and his 11 sons. Notice he only has 11 still at this point. The youngest, the 12th son, has not been born yet. But he does have a daughter. We know about Dinah for sure. And we're going to actually revisit her in the next chapter. Well, next two chapters, actually this week probably. So he gets up and he takes his wives, his women, his sons, and he passed over the ford Jabbok. All right, so let's take a look at, when we look at the map of Jacob. Oh, that seems to be a bit offline. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's find that map. There we go. And let us go ahead and share that up here. All right, so this is the map of Jacob. And remember that he came down from Haran. All right, and we're going to go in here. We're going to put this down. And when it says Jabbok, well, I want you to notice here, the river Jabbok is here, and it joins the Jordan River. So Mahanaim is where Jacob was. If you remember, Jacob was up here in Mahanaim. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more on this section, because we're going to be spending some time here. So we do see Mahanaim right there. And actually here, we'll uncover me a little bit if I can. Maybe, maybe not. Let's see. We might be able to, there we go. We can do it that way. All right, so we've got Mahanaim, which is the last place that we saw Jacob. Now he has come down to here, which we are covering in this passage, but he crossed over Jabbok, but he's already crossed over Jabbok, and he's now here where it says Peniel, and we'll talk, that is what we've already read about today, but we just named it just in this passage. So then this, however, the river Jabbok here is where he sent them over up by Succoth. Up there. All right. So he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok, or the river Jabbok. So he's here in Peniel and he sent them over to Succoth, over in that range over there. All right. So that's something to keep in mind. That is where he is. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. Now, this means that he did not just send over, he sent his wives, the servants who were the mothers of his other children, and his children. So basically what it's saying here is he has sent everyone over. Now, remember, he has put these men in front of him to greet Esau, and they are further south. So these men are further south and they have to pass through. Esau will have to pass through these men in order to reach Jacob. But Jacob thought, you know what, just for extra safety for my wife and my children. Remember, he's got his troops into 2 different groups as well. So he's got one set of troops probably still up in Mahanaim. He has sent his children and his wives over the ford. He's forded them over across the river to the other side so that they can be safe. And now he is all alone. All right, so he's just sitting here all alone right in that little area where it says Peniel. All right, and he said, and Jacob, and it says here in verse 24, and Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of day. Now, there wrestled a man with him. We don't know specifically who exactly this is. There's a lot of people who will say this was a pre-incarnation of Christ. And I'm not going to tell you that's not a possibility. We do know that whoever this was either, it does seem like as we go through here that it is considered God himself who he wrestles with. And we'll talk about that as we get further along. But otherwise, this word man, it just means somebody in human form. It is not a spirit. It is not a spirit. It is not the Spirit of God. It is an actual physical human. And actually the word in Hebrew, I looked it up before I started here. The word in Hebrew actually is more a connotation of the difference between a man and a woman. It's saying a male figure. It's not so much about whether it's a man or whether it's somebody who is of the male gene, like that is their biological. It is a man. It is male, not female. That's the inclination of that particular Hebrew word. All right. And so Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of day. So all night long, Jacob is wrestling with this man who we believe it to be God, just so that I believe it to be God, possibly a pre-incarnation of Christ, because we see that in a couple of other passages in Scripture. But it is definitely God himself. And there's a reason for this, because as it comes down, it says, and when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. When it says, now, the biggest problem in this passage is understanding the pronouns. The pronouns in this passage are very, very difficult. So sometimes the word he is referring to man, and sometimes the word he is referring to Jacob. And if, as an English teacher, there's a lot of what I would refer to as pronoun antecedent agreement, a lack of clarity in the pronoun antecedent agreement. What that means is that it is unclear which he it's referring to unless you are dividing this apart in Hebrew. And I'm going to show you where it is. So, for example, if you were making these notes, you would say, when Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to substitute the man and Jacob in some of these. So when the man saw that he prevailed not against Jacob, the man touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh. And Jacob is sitting there wrestling and wrestling and wrestling and wrestling back and forth and back, and he is not letting him go. He knows there is something in him that he knows this is God incarnate. There's something about it that clued in Jacob, and he is not going to let God know until he gets what he needs from God. All right? And so the man touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. So what it's saying here is that he touched the hollow of his thigh. And actually, let me do this. I am going to actually go to here. Let's see here. I do apologize. We're going to do this for just a second. We're going to do a little bit of cleanup here. And we're going to test something. Do that. We're going to do that. And that. And I apologize. This is some technical stuff I'm stopping in the middle for. And I just apologize for that so much. 1, 2, 1, 2. We're going to do this for 20. Because I am actually getting distracted in my teaching here, and I apologize. I should have done this ahead of time. I should have double checked this. All right, here we go. Okay, so what's happening here? Well, it says that he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and it set Jacob's thigh out of joint. All right, so his thigh is now out of joint, and it says as he wrestled with him. Now, this is really hard because Jacob's thigh is out of joint and he's still wrestling with him. He is still holding on. And he says, "Let me go, for the day breaketh." And he said, "I will not." So, basically, let me interpret this again for you, or say this in the phrase so we don't get mixed up with these pronouns. And the man said, "Let me go, for the day breaketh." And Jacob said, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." Jacob's like, he instinctively knows this is God. And he's like, I'm not letting him go. No, unless you bless me, I'm not letting you go. I may be halting in my thigh. My thigh may be, my hip may be out of joint, because when it says the hollow of his thigh, it is actually referring to the part of the inner side of the groin, the inside of the groin where the hip joins into the groin area. It is that little area, and that is out of joint, which means his hip is out of joint. So he's got a hip injury. Jacob goes, I may have a hip injury. I may be faulting and limping. I mean, I can barely do this, but I am not letting go of this. I am not going to let go of God until he gives me a blessing. And he said unto him, and the man said unto him, "What is thy name?" And he said, Jacob. And the man said, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." Remember that Jacob means deceiver or supplanter. And he goes, you're no longer going to be Jacob, the deceiver, the planter. Your name is now Israel. And Israel means as a prince of God, basically. Let me look up the exact number so I can read it for you. 3478. We're going to go to the back of our Bible. I just want to make sure I say it to you exactly, but 3478. And this is extremely relevant and extremely important because this is where God changes his name. 3478. Let's see here. 39, 36, 35, 34 is going to be on the next page back. 3478. It says, he will rule as God. It is the symbolic name of Jacob, Israel, or Israel, from 410. He will rule as God. Okay, so and it is referred to the children of Israel, or Israel. The children of Israel is what they become known as later on. They become known as the children of he who will rule as God. Basically, a prince of God, or the prince of God, actually is really more the impact of this. So he says, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. He says, you have prevailed by struggling with God. You understood that Jacob wanted the birthright from Esau, and he stole the blessing from him. But what Jacob realized more than anything else is that the blessing from God was far more important than anything from Esau or anything from Jacob. This blessing from God, he wrestles with it. This is the point at which Jacob comes to a realization and a commitment and realizes that the God of Abraham and Isaac is his God. And he commits and he's firm and he's like, I am not letting go of God till I get a blessing of him. I'm not letting go of him. I'm not making this an option to let go of God. He's like, this is way too important. He goes, this is way too important. I can't let go of this. He says, I can't let go of him. This is way too important. And Jacob asked of him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And the man said, wherefore is it thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. The man's basically saying, why do you even need to know my name? You already know who I am, Jacob. You already know this is God. You already know why I'm here, who I'm here for, and why. You're wrestling with me, and you have prevailed. And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. So this is, and as Jacob passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Jacob, for the rest of his life, has a hip injury, essentially. Because, and this is why, and it says, therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. Basically, even to this day, an Orthodox Jew will not eat the meat that comes from that part of the thigh from an animal, obviously, not from a person, but it is as a symbol of what God did for Jacob. So even today, the Israelites do not eat of that part of the animal. They remove it. They might feed it to their dog. I don't know what they do with it entirely, or if they just throw it away, but They will not eat that because for them, that is a very, I think it's the sciatica is what is the part that they don't eat. I'd have to look that up to remind myself, but there is that portion right down there, and they do not eat it ever because it is almost considered sacred as part of, because of this story. But what is this story actually about? What this story is about more than anything else is about the fact that we all have a choice to make when it comes to God. Jacob had a choice. He could have wrestled for a little bit and then let go of God and said, you know what? Nope, I don't want any part of this God. I don't want any part of the God of Abraham, Isaac. I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to be that. I don't have to have it. But it's interesting this happens while and before he's reunited to Esau. For even though this is an Old Testament story, most people, most theologians would agree that this is the point at which Jacob accepts God as his God fully, completely, and surrenders to him and surrenders to his will. This is the story where Jacob goes, this God is my God. This God is now personal to me. This is not just the God of Abraham. This is not just the God of Isaac. This God is my God. And his name is changed from Jacob to Israel. This is why you'll see that sometimes people who have had a really rocky past will sometimes change their name from before, after they become a Christian. They will sometimes take it on and take on a new name to indicate that the old is made new. Now, you do not have to change your name if you're a Christian. But I will tell you this. There are certain names that bring with them a connection more to sin than to godliness. Jacob, the name Jacob means deceiver, supplanter. I have never understood why parents go, oh, I want to name my child a godly biblical name. Let's name him Jacob. Really? You want to name your child deceiver, supplanter, troublemaker? Why don't you name your child Israel, a prince of God? Like, if you want to emulate the good things about Jacob in your children, name your child something after the good. There are other names in the Bible that are their names and they're in the Bible, but they are not good people. I mean, why would you want to name your child something that means deceiver or supplanter, or that doesn't make any sense? So parents, if you're a Christian, be careful what you name your children. It is important. It does make a difference. And if you are a newer Christian, or if you have just accepted Christ recently and your name connects you to your old life, consider, would you like to change your name? You may not. That's okay if you don't want to, or if it's not what you want. But many times Christians will change their name from the name they had to a new name to indicate that this is who I am. I am no longer this person. I am now. It's a symbolic thing. It doesn't have to happen. But understand that when Jacob wrestled with God and prevailed, God gave him a new name. And that new name means Prince of God. It's something that glorifies God. It lifts him up. And he says, basically, it changed his name from being deceiver, supplanter to a man of God. What an awesome change. How amazing. How incredible. Now he is no longer the deceiver. Now he is the Prince of God, that man of God. So what does Jacob do? As soon as Jacob does that, and he says, and he gets the blessing from God, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And I already kind of know, but I want to look up what Peniel actually means. 64:39. 6439. Oh, went very fast this time. 6439. And it means it literally means face of God. So Peniel means face of God. And he goes, I saw the face of God and I lived. So I'm going to name this place Face of God because this is where I want to always remember that this is where I met God face to face. And that's something that, where is your Peniel? I can tell you where my Peniel was. My Peniel was at the side of my parents' bed when I was 4 years old. A lot of people are like, whoa, you were only 4? Yes, but I will tell you this, there is no doubt in my mind because I don't even remember if my parents were there. I presume that one of my parents or both of my parents were there when I accepted Christ. It didn't matter because that personal relationship you have with God, all that matters is that you are there with God, that you are meeting with God. And I remember making that decision to be, I only have 3 memories from before I was 5 years old. And this is one of them. And the other 2 memories are more like vague, general, basic recollections. This is my only very clear, I remember all the surroundings. And my parents did not remind me of these surroundings at all. My parents wouldn't have said, in fact, I think that my parents didn't necessarily know that that was actually my conversion because, when a child is that young and they make that decision, there is always something in a parent's mind that says, well, did they really, or were they just feeling pressure? Were they just feeling fear? Were they just like, and they kind of wait a little bit and make sure that their child actually did make that. But I very definitely, that was when I met God, when I was face to face with God and said, yes, that's who I want to be aligned with. Now, have I always aligned with God and have I always done what God wanted? Absolutely not. But that was when I met God face to face and I said, that's my Peniel. In my parents' bedroom at 4 years old, down, kneeling by their bed with the red velvet bed cover, because it was the 70s, and the red velvet curtains in the bedroom. My mom had some really, really nice looking stuff. I remember meeting God in that space. And by the way, we moved from that house when I was 5 years old. So in the next year, we moved. And I very definitely know where I was when I wrestled with God. So where is your Peniel? If you've had it, where have you met with, wrestled with, and aligned yourself with God? Because that's what Jacob did here. And that's why this is the first time that we see the phrase, the children of Israel. Because until this point, he wasn't Israel, he was Jacob. Now he is Israel, the prince of God, or he who is of God. And his children and his children's children and all the children become known as the children of Israel. And to this day, we still have, the Jewish nation is still referred to as the nation of Israel. And whether you agree with everything that the secular nation does in Israel or not, it doesn't matter because the children of Israel began here in Genesis 32, verses 22 to 32. So my challenge to you would be, where is your Peniel? Where is the point that you wrestled with God and said, yes, God, everything I have is yours. I want that blessing from you. I want my life to be for you and to be only about you, and everything else falls away. Because that is something we only do when we are alone. Jacob was all alone. He didn't have his men. He wasn't surrounded. He didn't have his children. This was his personal wrestling with God. I'd love to hear your comment below. Where is your Peniel? Answer the question, where is your Peniel? Where was your Peniel? Where did you wrestle with God and realize that he was all there was for you? And put that comment below. I would love to hear about it. But I do appreciate you being here today. That's all that we're going to do today. And tomorrow we'll be moving on to where Jacob finally comes face to face with Esau. Big moment as well. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye for now.
This world, give me Jesus. When I am alone, oh, when I am alone, when I am alone, give me Jesus, give me Jesus, oh, give me Jesus.